Hey, what's going on, guys? So, Mr. Flores here, and this video, we are going to talk about solving equations. This is probably one of the most important lessons or videos that has to do with algebra, because you can't solve an equation. You can't do anything in Algebra 1. Geometry is pretty rough. You can't do anything in Algebra 2. You won't pass pre-calc. You can't pass calculus, and you can't be the next Mr. Flores. So, this is very, very important. It's a very basic idea. But yet it's one of the most difficult things for kids to do. So I'll try and break it down as easy as possible. So hopefully you pay attention and you learn something. So before we talk about solving them, we have to talk about what is an equation. So an equation is just two expressions that are combined with an equals sign. Okay. So what we were talking about last class when we dealt with expressions. So let's say here I have 3x plus 2. That's an expression. It has two terms. We can only simplify it. We can't solve it. All right. But now we're going to deal with equations. So I have 3x plus 2 is one expression. Another expression is the number 10. And they're going to be combined with an equal sign. Okay. All an equal sign is, it's just telling us that the 3x plus 2 is equal to the number 10. All right. For instance, think of a seesaw. So I'm going to try and draw one the best I can. So if we're talking about a seesaw, it's just a flat surface with a little triangle in the middle, and it could go down that way, go down that way. And let's talk about, I don't know, let's say these are apples. We have 1 apple, 2 apple, 3 apples. Let's make it 4. So there's 4 apples on the left side. In order to keep this balanced so it doesn't fall down or tip over, we need there also to be 4 apples on the right side. Okay? So now, one of the biggest things that students forget when they're dealing with equations is that since everything has to be equal, whatever you do to one side of your equation, you must do the other. So let's say that we throw an orange on top of the left side. We don't want any of our fruit to spill over, so if we add an orange to the left side, we must add an orange to the right side. Likewise, say we get tired of the orange and an apple. So now we're just left with 3 apples on the left. We must also take away the orange on the right side, as well as another apple. All right. So in a nutshell, an equation is two expressions that are combined or put together with an equal sign, and both the left side and the right side of the equation must always be equal. Okay. So you might ask, how do we balance equations? And the easiest way I can tell you is by using inverses. So if we go back to math, the 4 basic math concepts, or the mathematical operations that we deal with on a daily basis, okay, we have addition and subtraction. Then we have multiplication. Oops. And then we also have division. Okay. When we're solving equations, we want to use that addition and subtraction are inverses, aka they undo one another, and multiplication and division are inverses. Okay. So for instance, when we're talking about addition and subtraction, when we solve equations, we want to make everything go to 0 using addition and subtraction. So let's say we have a positive 3. The inverse of a positive 3, or the inverse of addition, is subtraction. So if we subtract 3, our answer is 0. Likewise, if we have a negative 2, in order to make that go to 0, we must add 2. They undo each other. So when you do addition and subtraction, you want to use them to make things cancel, make things go away. Then, for instance, if we are talking about multiplication and division, you want your answer to become 1. All right. So if you have the number 3, you divide it by 3, it's equal to 1. Then if you have 1/2, you multiply by 2, that also goes to 1. Okay. So that's the whole idea of inverses. You want things to cancel, make things go away. And we have to use that to balance our equations. All right. So if we look here, there's 4 steps really that I use to solve equations. All right, and we're going to use these steps every time we solve them. All right. A lot of people sometimes have more steps, some have less. It really all depends how you word it. I just like to say I have 4, and they're pretty self-explanatory. So let's say we have our equation 3x. Actually, I don't want to do that one yet. Let's do neither one. We have x minus 2 is equal to 10. Okay. We know it's an equation because there's an equal sign. And the variable we need to get by itself is x. All right. The first step for solving equations is simplify both sides of the equation. What I mean by that is, can we distribute, combine like terms? Can we make our equation easier on the left or right side? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the left side. We have x minus 2. Can we combine like terms? Can we distribute? Can we simplify our fractions? Really anything. But if you look here, we can't because we have an x, we have a positive, and we have a negative 2. So this left side is simplified. Now let's go to the right side. Equals 10. Is that simplified? Well, yeah, because there's nothing we can do with the 10. All right, so we passed our first step. Second step, get variable term, or term with variable alone on one side, get every other term to the opposite side. Okay, what I mean by that, basically solving equations is all about finding out what does x equal. So you need to look at whatever side of the equation has your x terms or your variable terms, and you want to get them to one side, get everything that doesn't have a variable to the other. So if you look here, we have x minus 2 equals 10. There's no variables on the right, so we just need to get this x guy all by himself. So like I said, we want to use our inverses. Since we have a minus 2, the inverse of subtracting 2 is adding 2. But again, just like our apples and oranges, whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do the other. Since we added 2 to the left, we add 2 to the right. X equals 12. All right. So the third step, I'm going to talk about in our next example. But the fourth is check your answer to make sure you are correct. Okay, this is a step that a lot of kids overlook because it takes too much time, they say, or they're lazy. But the good thing with algebra and solving equations is that since we found x to be 12, if we can substitute this 12 back into the original equation for x, it should have a balanced equation. So we're going to do 12 minus 2 equals 10. 12 minus 2 is 10 equals 10. We're good. We're smart. We got it. All right. In a nutshell, that's how you solve every single equation, whether it's 1,000 steps, 2 steps. Ours was just 1 step because we just added the 2. All right. But that's how you solve equations. It's very, very easy, very simple. So let's try a little more difficult one. All right. So we have 3x plus 6 equals 18. All right. So again, let's go back to our steps for solving equations. Step 1, simplify both sides of the equation. We have 3x plus 6 equals 18. 3x and a 6 we can't combine, so that's simplified. The 18 is also simplified. There's nothing we can do there. So step 2, get the term with variable alone on one side, get every other term to the opposite side. So we have a 3x here. Anything that's not part of this 3x term, we must move to the right side. So we're going to subtract 6. Just like what we do to the left side, you must do the right. Now we have 3x is equal to 12. All right. This is where our third step comes in. All right. And we don't have to do the last one because there's no coefficient attached to our variable. But for this problem, since we have a 3x right here, we just want to know what x is. So you must isolate your variable. Okay. So now this is where the multiplication and division comes back into it. Because we got to think to ourselves, what is going on between this 3 and the x? Since they're right next to each other and the 3 is the coefficient, it means multiplication. So we think back, what's the inverse of multiplication? Division. Divide both sides by a 3. You get x equals 4. So again, in order to find out if you're really correct, let's substitute that 4 back in. So it becomes 3 times 4 plus 6 equals 18. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 6 equals 18. 18 equals 18. We're good. Our correct answer is 4. Okay. I'll never ask you guys on like a test or quiz to show me or to check your answer, but it's something you should really get in the habit of doing, because with algebra it's nice. If x is equal to 4, that means that x will always be 4 for this certain equation. It's never going to change. So on a test or quiz, it's nice to know, hey, am I doing this right? Like, am I wrong? Am I right? Do I need to fix something? Did I read or multiply by a negative improperly? So it's always nice to go back and check to see if you're correct. All right. So for this video, I'll do one more example, and I promise this one will hopefully help us out. So it's negative x over 2 plus 2 is equal to 17. All right. Again, simplify both sides of the equation. This one we technically could, since we're dealing with fractions, we could simplify it a little bit, but we can't. Well, we're not going to simplify the left side because it's negative x over 2 plus 2. The right side is 17, so the first step is done. Step 2, get terms of the variable alone on one side, get every other term to the opposite side. Since it's a negative x over 2 is our variable term, we must get rid of this. Plus 2, the inverse of addition is subtraction. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. And we have negative x over 2 equals 15. All right. Now the last part of this is isolate your variable. Okay. So our variable, we have a negative x over 2 equals 15. There's 2 different ways we can do this. All right. The operation of this 2 and the x is division. So since we know that the opposite of division is multiplication, we can multiply both sides by 2 and we'll get x by itself. But since there's a negative sign here, what I would do if I were you is multiply both sides by a negative 2. That way the 2's cancel and this negative becomes a positive. So now we have x equals 15 times negative 2 is negative 30. And that's our correct answer. I'll let you guys substitute this one back in just for time purposes and just so you guys can do something on your own. But in a nutshell, this is how you solve equations. You follow these 4 steps, use your inverses, and you're pretty much on your way to solving them. No matter how difficult or messy they get, these are the basic steps until we start dealing with quadratics later in the year where you're going to have to factor and everything. But again, these 4 steps are the most basic steps to solving equations. This video has had easy equations. I'm going to upload another video that's going to have more difficult equations. I'm going to throw in a word problem or 2. But as long as you can stick with these steps, you're good. If you have any questions, check out the website, check out some work. Have a good day.